Isamu Shibayama, June 6, 1930. And then when I got baptized, I was baptized as Carlos Arturo Shibayama.
My name is George. My Japanese name is Kazuharu. And my Spanish name is Jorge Carlos. And last name is Naganuma. I was born in Lima, Callao, Peru. And I was born in August 20, 1938.
I'm Jimmy Kazushige Jose Antonio Naganuma, and I was born in Callao, Peru, South America in 1938, and I'm 83 years old.
I was born in Callao, Peru, in 1942. My dad became very successful along with many other Japanese Peruvians, and that was one of the problems that the Peruvian Callao, Lima, those cities had were really almost intimidated with the success, and that was one of the reasons why they made a deal with the U.S. government during the war, and from what I understand, the government actually gave Peru like $25 million as part of this whole deal to get us out. It was hard for the government to exchange a Japanese American born here, because they're American citizens, to exchange them to Japan. So they start to round up Japanese from Latin America to be a part of the exchange.
In fact, my grandparents were taken, in the early 1942, and they were taken, put in camp in the United States in Sigelville, and then they were used in one of the exchanges and sent to exchange with civilians, U.S. civilians that were caught in Japan. And so after they left Peru, I never got to see him again.
Even before Pearl Harbor, the FBI was investigating the Japanese Americans, because Reverend Fukuda is a good example. He was arrested the night of the Pearl Harbor bombing. And many of the community leaders were arrested the day after, December 8th. They had paperwork all set. They had their speeches all, so this is all ready. The Pearl Harbor bombing just triggered it off.
The business, the property, all the belongings, furniture, whatever. They just had to just leave it there, and that's it. They lost everything, my family. Comparing with the what the Nazi did to the Jews, they arrested them and told them pack up, and their business was just gone, right? Just like that. That's what happened to our family. They lost everything, and they never got anything back afterwards. Nothing.
Every time a U.S. transport came into the port of Callao, words got around, and head of the family went into hiding, including my father. The police came to our house several times, and not finding my father. The last time they came after him, again, my father wasn't there, so they took my mother and put her in jail. And my sister, who was 11 at the time, went with her because she didn't want our mother to go by herself. And as soon as my father found out about it, he gave himself up. He came out of hiding. And that's when my mother and sister were released. And I guess they gave us around a week, or I should say we had about a week to get ready. And then we boarded a U.S. Army transport called Cuba. It was March of 1944. Once we got on the ship, the women and children were put in a small cabin up on deck, and the men were put down below. And like all the kids, like myself, we were put down below too with the men. And we were only allowed to go on deck twice a day for 10 minutes. And during that time, the women and children had to stay inside the cabin. And it took us 21 days to go from Callao through Panama Canal to New Orleans. And during that time, we never got to see the family, the rest of the family. You know, like even on the boat, we were guarded by military personnel, and there were machine guns and rifles, and they didn't speak Spanish. So, you know, we couldn't communicate with them. In fact, we were guarded by destroyers and submarines too.
From the time we got on the ship till we landed in New Orleans, Louisiana, it was really bad for us because we were all seasick all the way through.
I was 20 months old, and one of my second oldest sister kept asking for milk for me, and they basically ignored her.
They took us to a warehouse, to a big building, and where we were all stripped naked. And then they used DDT and fumigated all of us like animals.
My mom told me that when we got off the train, there were Japanese faces there, and she thought we were in Japan. It turned out that those people were the bus drivers for the buses to take us to the camp. So, and as Jimmy said, you know, they welcomed us there, but no one knew what they were saying because the main language is Spanish, you know. So that was kind of the sense of what took place. My mom told me that during that trip, she really thought that was the end of our family.
Well, we taken to, I guess, a big barrack, a long one, where two family had split in half. Our families got 2 rooms and a half. And my mother would sleep in the half. The other 2 will be all for boys and all for the girls. I had sumo lesson, I had kendo lesson, calligraphy lesson. For me, it was the first time, and I had a lot of fun there. Swimming pool again, it was first time I ever swam there. I learned how to swim there, in fact.
Life was probably very good for the younger people, but it was awful for, of course, my parents and the older siblings.
You know, it's not like we wanted to come here. We didn't want to come here. We were forced to come here. We were brought here by the government. So how can that be illegal? In Seabrook, again, you know, we were the last ones there, so our quarters, it was like a barrack and camp, except that we didn't have fences around us. And we community bathrooms and laundry room. It was just like camp. My father couldn't feed a family of, of 8 because my mother was pregnant. She couldn't work, so my sister and I had to go to work. So I never went to school again. During the peak season, we had to work 12-hour shifts, and we were rotating shifts every 2 weeks from day to night. 7 days a week. We were there for 2.5 years, and then finally my father gave up, about going back to Peru, and we moved to Chicago, 1940, March of 49. Well, he had friends in Chicago. In fact, few families went to Chicago from Seabrook. The only thing was that we had to report to the immigration office, which was in the Chicago post office. We had to go and report once a year, every January. March of 1952, I got a U.S. Army draft notice. And so then, since I was fighting deportation as classified as illegal alien, I figured I better go in, just in case. So I went in the Army. And I took basic in Arkansas, and then after basic, they sent me to Germany.
They were going to deport us. They really didn't know what to do with the Japanese Peruvian family. That's why we ended up there much longer in Crystal City camp. They didn't know what to do with us, so we had deportation papers. And you heard of the attorney named Wayne Collins. He actually came to Crystal City camp because of the situation at Tule Lake. He's helping the families there, and then the families came to Crystal City because that's where the families were reunited. And then he heard about the Japanese Peruvian families. He's doing all of this pro bono. So you could imagine someone that's Caucasian doing things like that for, in minority families. Very unheard of, especially during those days. And he, being an attorney legally, and worked together with Reverend Fukuda of the Concord Church, was able to file papers to keep us here.
We couldn't go back to Peru because the Peruvian government didn't want us back. Besides, there was nothing left there anyway. We didn't have our property, nothing, business, nothing. That was all taken away, so we had no money, nothing. And the other choice was maybe go back to Japan. But Japan lost the war. They got nothing there for us. So we're stuck. And somehow the Konkokyo Church, the Reverend, he was very nice to us, and somehow arranged a sponsor for us to live in San Francisco.
My sister Kyoka, my dad, and myself contracted tuberculosis. And I think in that way, obviously it affected our health. The special class that we're talking about, this is at the Pacific Heights Grammar School. I was put into a special class because of my health. There were maybe half a dozen kids, you know. There was one period that I was actually hospitalized. I can't remember how long because I was undernourished, and I did come out, and I think I remember people say, "Oh, they kind of fatten you up." We were never fat, but you know. So life after camp, I can't really say, but I know my brother Jimmy saying things like he always wondered why we never had meat to eat. That we eat the same kind of foods all the time.
Oh, it was really rough for us, for my brothers and myself, not knowing how to speak the language. You don't know how to read or write. How do you communicate with somebody? For many, many years, I would just keep quiet. People ask me a question, and I would just smile or shy away.
When we were trying to get the citizenship, you know, we really worked hard on that because we were denied so many times.
From when did you try to do that?
From the time we got out of camp, and then since the Peruvian, we wanted to go back to Peru, but the Peruvian government wouldn't allow us to get into the country, so then we had to stay here, and that's when I started fighting for citizenship.
My family and I are very proud of my father for his pursuit for justice and for his courage to hold the U.S. government accountable for its wrongdoing. Despite my father's and others' efforts to educate the American public, the Japanese-Peruvian internment is still widely unknown. We need the U.S. government to apologize and acknowledge what it did. We need educational funds, and we need full disclosure. So what happened to the Japanese Peruvians will not happen to my family, to any other family, or to any other group again.
We have a nephew in Los Angeles. He's my oldest sister's oldest son. He's already like in his mid-60s, and he doesn't know a lot about it, and he's kept asking, you know, he'd like to know more about his mom. So that's how I got involved. There are people that don't believe our story because there's no evidence. Very few photos, because we weren't allowed to have camera, but there were people that were able to take pictures. We have photos and things now, you know. Arturo Gonzalez, he came over to me and said, "Here's some pieces from the swimming pool." And I said, "Wow, you know, how'd you get this?" Well, he said, when they tore down the swimming pool, that wasn't done right away after camp. It was only about 20 plus years ago. He thought they would be of value to somebody. So he kept it for 20 years. And when we arrived there, he gave it to the survivors of the camp. We keep hearing things like, boy, you guys got screwed, the Japanese Peruvians. I heard you guys were kidnapped, things like that. And yes, that's all true. But a very small percentage, maybe in the entire world, maybe we're lucky if even 0.5% of the people in the world knows our story. And that's why it's important to have this pilgrimage and to continue on, not just us, but all the other camps. We have to carry this story on and put it into the textbook, and it becomes part of history.